Hello, Trevor here, Alan's Music Centre, again for the Hobby Organist channel. And I thought I'd start off with a jolly number, a good sort of swing up tempo number. And this song kind of sprung to mind because somebody mentioned that there had been a query on social media on one of the Facebook pages about that particular song, because that song was used on our very first DVD that we recorded in the store. I'm sure I've with the story already, where we filmed our first DVD in the store, and it was played on the Lowrey Stardust. And as we've already said, we had to avoid copyright issues, so me and Tom wrote some of our own songs, and that's a little song that I wrote. And funnily enough, that kind of was the genesis for the Lowrey fanfare that we then developed. In fact, if you listen very carefully, they actually have the same middle eight in them. And so they follow the very same pattern. In fact, you can play the Lowrey fanfare with that swing rhythm. Same middle eight. The two are kind of interchangeable. Using a lot of our Lowrey tricks there, we were using the fill-in button there to mask a transpose going up a tone. We're using a fantastic style called Frank and the Count, which is one of these brilliant styles that keeps changing, has all those different things going on. So yeah, so for anybody, for the people that are asking about that song on social media, it never had a title really. It was just something that I came up with at the spur of the moment because we needed some songs to play. And in fact, a lot of the songs that we did on the DVDs, we did improvise while we were playing, because it's kind of easier to do that rather than to try and work something out very carefully beforehand and then remember it. It's easier just to kind of just go with the flow. So yeah, that's where that song comes from. Anyway, proper another one of my ridiculous diversions, because today we were going to talk about harmony. It's been asked about a lot. The harmony feature on the Lowrey organs, and actually the other reason why I started with that song is that actually that uses the harmony feature to give us this lovely big band sound. So what we're going to do though, I'm just going to take you all back to square one and talk about why we use harmony and what harmony is there for, and why it is probably one of the most important features on the Lowrey organ, in fact on any organ, for making you sound good. And it doesn't matter how good a musician you are, if you're brilliant at playing all the chords yourself, there's things that the harmony can do that I can't physically do myself, because it being an automated process, it can do things that you can't do with your fingers. So it doesn't matter how brilliant a player you are, the harmony still can allow you to do things that you wouldn't normally be able to do. So it's a cracking feature, and so it's one that applies to everybody of any standard. So let's just begin first of all by talking about why we use harmony. Well, harmony comes up a lot in music. In fact, most music you hear is based on the harmonies. In fact, we're talking about harmony not in terms of concentrating about our chords, but we're talking about harmony in the melody. So we're used to obviously the idea that you hear solo, so you hear somebody who's singing on their own, they sing a melody line all on their own, and you kind of common sense a singer on their own can only sing one note at a time. And the same way if a trumpet player stands in front of you, they can only play one note at a time. But we very rarely actually hear music being played like that. We normally hear a lot more interesting what we call harmony going alongside the melody. So for example, when you hear a big band play and you see all that band laid out in front of you. You've got the saxophones, the trumpets, all the different variations of saxophones, all those different instruments. They're not all playing the same note. So they're not all, if they're playing the melody for Little Brown Jug, if I can remember it, they're not all playing the same note, because actually that would sound very, very boring and it wouldn't sound very full. So what they do is they all play in harmony with each other, and they take generally one part of the harmony each. And so you hear a... Likewise, when you hear a choir singing, the choir doesn't all sing the same note. They will all have their different roles. So you have the soprano singing the top notes, the altos below them, then the tenors and the baritones, then right at the bottom the bass. And so that's what makes the sound interesting. It makes it sound full, because you have a harmony going on. You have all these different notes all working together to make the melody. Now, when do we come to learn to play the organ? Obviously, the first challenge we have is actually playing the right notes in the right order and not getting our fingers playing them. So the idea of playing more than one note is something that we're not really going to want to worry about until much later on in our playing. So, for example, if we're playing the very first tune that I learned to play was Merrily We Roll Along. One of those great little melodies, perfect for teaching people because you can do it all with 5 fingers. My wife was having to start doing a few piano lessons for friends, and we were trying to think of many melodies actually that just use 5 fingers, and that's it's an interesting challenge to do, is to try and think of all the songs that only have 5 fingers, or only use, and because when you put your hand on there, obviously you've got 5 fingers, 5 notes, so you can actually play these melodies just with one hand without moving it around. We didn't come up with that many, so if you can come up with some more to tell me. We've got Merrily Roll Along, we had Largo, the theme from the New World Symphony. And then if you work with Kenneth Baker, you'd have Merrily Roll Along. And Bark Roll, I think, was another one of his. And of course the famous one, When the Saints. And Jingle Bells. Or if you look with Yamaha, the Yamaha Music School, there's a wonderful piece they had called The Laughing Samba. Used to have many a great fun yelling out the number notes notes for that, because when we first get people playing, we actually number the fingers. So and so I remember many times shouting, 3 1 3 1 3 1 3 1 3 1 4 2 4 2 4 2 4 2 5 4 3 2 1. Good little melody, that one. Anyway, gone off the point. So when we first learn to play, as we were just demonstrating, actually you want things to be as easy as possible. You're doing one note at a time. But that's generally not how you hear music being played. So it's one of the reasons when you first learn to play, you think, well, I don't sound as good, or it doesn't sound as nice as the music I hear, because you don't generally hear just those single note melodies like that. What you tend to hear is something that's been harmonised, so you hear this kind of thing. Sounds a lot fuller, a lot more interesting. But as you can imagine, that's a lot more difficult to play than just doing one note. And in fact, when I was learning to play, it took me a very, very long time to get to the point of putting chords in. And in fact, when I first learnt to add chords to the right hand, I used to write them all on the music for me. And they used to, my music was a right mess. Until you eventually get to the point where you can automatically add the notes in to make the chord. So the question is also, though, but how do you know which notes to add in? You know, I just sat there and glibly went. But how did I know what notes to put in there as the harmony? Well, there's obviously lots of musical reasons why you use particular harmony notes, but for our purposes, from the way that we play the organ, the important thing is we're playing a chord down here. And essentially it's the notes in that chord that we're using in the harmony of the right hand. Not necessarily in the same order, and not necessarily all of them, but they are the notes in the chord that we're actually adding up to the right hand to give us our harmony. And they think that's common sense really, because if you're adding different notes to the ones you had down here, then you're going to get a discord. They're going to sound, you know, sort of, it's going to sound wrong. So they have to be in harmony with each other. They have to be the correct notes. So the notes that I'm adding when I play a chord in the right hand is actually the same notes that I've been playing in my left hand. So if you look at that very carefully, if you can see on the video, I'm playing a C chord there, and because I learnt McKenna Baker, I play it in this position with a C in the middle. And so when I play my melody note up here, my Merrily We Roll Along, it starts on E. So what I'm doing is adding the notes of the chord that are down here up to there. And so that's great, because the melody note's at the top, got the chord in there. Well, for the next notes, obviously I have to think of something a bit differently, because the next note is a D, and of course D doesn't feature in that chord. So what I'm doing is actually moving all the notes down. Now, don't get bogged down with all that, because that is actually quite complicated and a very difficult thing to learn to play and do naturally. And it's one of the reasons why in the 70s, I'm assuming it was the 70s, I'm not an expert on Lowrey history, so again, I'm sure somebody in the comment section will correct me as to when exactly it was introduced. But it dawned upon the engineers at the time for Lowrey that if they could find some way to automate that process, it would make life a million times easier for all the people learning to play. Because all of Lowrey's success in the past was based on making instruments that the man in the street could play. It was a very important concept, and all their instruments were something that somebody could learn to play who wouldn't normally learn to play a piano, or the piano would be too hard, they didn't have time to learn the piano. It was something that would be accessible very, very quickly. And so the technology was developing at a very rapid pace then, to give that technology to make it easier to play. And of course we all know about the idea of single finger chords, where you place one note and it plays the chord for you. Well, this kind of is the idea of having single finger chords up here in the right hand. And the reason why it's possible to automate this process is because, as we've already said, the chords or the notes that we need, we're already telling the organ by playing the chord down here. And so the brain of the organ, in this case a computer, back in them days it was literally done with all circuitry, can take those notes from down here and add them to that right hand. And of course at the time that was a revolutionary thing, that somebody could actually get a full harmony with just one note. And of course when you have something new and exciting like that, they wanted to give it a great name, so they called it the Automatic Organ Computer. Very grand title, because back in them days if you gave something the word computer, it was high-tech science, space missions, all this kind of thing. Computers are brilliant. Of course, it calls anything with a computer now, people don't expect it to work, or it needs updating every time you turn it on. But back then they were very excited about computers, and so they called their feature Automatic Organ Computer, AOC. And it did exactly that. In fact, we still have a button on the Lowrey organs, even though it's under this harmony list, called AOC. Now on the symphony I'm sitting here on the A series, they retained the word AOC on the panel. On the E series, because they moved over to having just one harmony button, the AOC comes up as one of the variations on the screen. But we can look at that when we have a quick look at an E series at the end of this. So, but for the time being, for most people, we're going to see a button that says AOC, or say if you're on an E series, you'll see it come up on the screen, and we'll look at that in a sec. So if I turn on AOC, what the AOC is doing is that process I talked about. It's taking the chord you play here and putting it in the right hand. So again, I play my Merrily We Roll Along. Now put the AOC on, and it's going to keep hitting random pedals. So it's very difficult nowadays to appreciate how brilliant a concept that is. There are so many things that we have on modern organs nowadays that we take for granted and they're there, they just do that. But when that came along, that was a real game changer for Lowrey and for everybody. And it was a real amazing thing that you could get this harmony from playing just one note in the right hand, and you could sound full like an orchestra or like a big band just with one finger. And so when we're playing on the Lowrey organs, a lot of our registrations, virtually all of the presets you come across, will be using that harmony feature to make it sound better, to enhance your playing, to make it sound good. Now, it comes with a couple of things to remember. As we said, AOC, the harmony feature, is taking the notes in the left hand and adding them to the right hand. So it's a kind of a given that you kind of have to get your chords right. Otherwise it's not going to sound right up there, because you're actually going to get it wrong twice. You're going to get it wrong down here and wrong up there. The other thing, and this is a very important thing, is that when you see people playing chords manually, when I was doing my Merry Roll Along, I was playing up here. I won't go through it all again. Now, when I learnt to play, we were always taught that you started at middle C, and so I should be playing that melody down there. The problem is, if I play down there with my harmony, it doesn't sound very nice because it's too deep. It sounds very, very muddy. So you have to move an octave up for the notes to be light enough so you can have that many notes. And so I would do that naturally if I was doing the chords myself. And so that's what we have to do naturally when we're using the AOC, because the AOC is no different. If we play down here, it's going to play muddy chords. So when you play your AOC, make sure you get things right. And secondly, play an octave higher than you would normally play. I mean, you're going to hear that anyway. As soon as you start playing down here, it will sound bleh, and so you want to move your hand up. So as you go through all these different presets in the Lowrey organ, you'll notice that the AOC is in there to give you harmony. Now, like most things, there's a lot more to it than just adding these notes. There's lots of different ways that you can add the notes. Remember I said at the beginning, it's adding these notes, but not necessarily all of them, and not necessarily in the same order. And sometimes it's breaking the notes up and put them in different orders and creating different harmonies. And this is why we now call it the harmony section, because originally there was only one kind of AOC. It was the most basic one that we were just doing. And so you only had one button that said AOC. And of course, very quickly the engineers experimented and came up with lots of different ways of doing the harmony. And so they came up with duets and free parts and all kinds of different kinds of harmony. So rather than now having AOC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all these different kind of things, they wanted to give them a name that described them better. So you have all these different kinds of harmony, duet, 3-part, and we're going to look at more in a sec. So that now the section is called harmony, and within the harmony, AOC is one of the settings that you can use. So on this organ that we're sitting here on the Symphony, I've got the AOC as a button. I also have duet. Now that does kind of what you would imagine. We just said on the AOC it's taking the whole chord there and adding it to the right hand. The duet is only taking one note, so you've got two instruments playing in duet. If we were sitting on a aria, we would have this wonderful feature whereby we can actually see via the lights the notes the harmony's adding. And I was just going to see if that came up on the keyboard screen on here, but it doesn't. It's unique to the aria. So maybe actually we'll do a little session tomorrow on the aria, and then you can actually see the lights moving with the harmony. But hopefully you can hear the difference there. That when we play with the full AOC, and then the duet, and of course the most famous time you kind of hear that kind of duet is going on with things like trumpets, if you like, the sort of the James Last sound. So if you had a trumpet sound going on, let's get rid of the organ. So normally when you hear that mornings at 7, the trumpets are playing in duet, so you play. Now I'm doing that with 2 notes. Put duet feature on. Now there is reason why I was able to play down in that octave range there is because the trumpet is quite a light sound, and that's the key thing. Is you're looking for the sound to stay light. So if you're, and of course it's only adding one extra note there, so it's not going to get too muddy and heavy for me. So that's what the duet does. In fact, Lowrey have put on these modern organs a ridiculous number of AOCs. In fact, on this symphony we've got 3 on the panel, and then we press the more button and they all come up on the screen as well. There's in fact how many? 4, 8, 12 different harmonies on there on top of the 3 others. So there's actually 15 different variations. Now I'm not going to go through them all. There's no point in describing all the technical differences between the two, because to be honest I don't know all of them myself. That's a good question for Bill Curry, who programmed all of these. But essentially each one will give you a different flavour, and they've been named as to kind of what you're looking to get out of them. So for example, there's a very easy one there called Octave, which is it's playing octaves for you. So of course you could use that if you're playing with your piano sound. Let's put on regular piano sound. Come on, piano in there. Get rid of our trumpet. Come on, piano in there. Regular harmony. Let's do the cocktail piano. So rather than going, there's block harmony. A big 4-note chord, kind of what you'd use in jazz. And that's one of the things that I was alluding to at the beginning, is about the wonderful thing about this feature is that, for example, sometimes to get that block harmony I'd have to use 2 hands to get that, and so I'd miss out on playing the chords. So with the block harmony feature on there, I can get that harmony, that big block harmony, without having to take my hand up with it. And there's a country harmony. That's a good one. Playing an exact harmony with me, it kind of sounds a bit kind of discordant in that country kind of style. There's a hymn one. Hymn one is one of my favourites. That does a lovely harmony. We use that on the choirs. Have we got a choir registration in here? Let's have a look. There we go. So for example, if you're playing with the choirs, said at the beginning, choirs always sing in harmony. I'm using 2 hands to get that. If I'm just doing that one note, it's a nice sound, but it's not wow. But if we go to that harmony section and bring in the hymn harmony, then it transforms it. It can be really, really effective, and so you can do stuff that I can't do as a player. I think when AOC first came out, it was kind of picked up upon for kind of jazz styles, because you could put on like a jazz registration. Of course, jazz players are used to sort of doing all that kind of stuff. But with the AOC, you can get that. Now those little twiddly bits I'm doing, I couldn't chord them, you know, I just couldn't play all the notes quick enough to get those twiddly bits in. But the AOC, because it's automated, actually do that myself if I was trying to play all the notes of the chords. So it actually gives us the opportunity to make a sound, something that we couldn't actually normally do as keyboard players. We wouldn't be able to move our fingers that fast and put them in all the different chord positions, but because there's a computer automating it for us, it can do that amazing effect. And of course the harmony is used all the time by all the presets. If we're trying to make a full orchestra, again, when you see an orchestra playing with the violins and the violas and the cellos, they're not all playing the same note. They're playing a harmony. They're taking one note of the harmony each, and it all comes together to make a big sound. So when you find a string registration on the Lowrey, an orchestra registration, it will use that harmony. The Lowrey programmed all these categories, and when we did all our presets as well, and all the packs, we're using this harmony all the time to create that big full sound. And of course the classic one, if you're playing the big band, if you're playing with Glenn Miller, it will do the Glenn Miller orchestra. Take that off. Doesn't sound like Glenn Miller. Same if you're playing with the big saxophones. Saxophone section there. Take the AOC off. You very, very clever. On a lot of the bigger Lowrys, where we have a polyphonic split, there's actually a separate harmony section for the split. So you can actually have a different harmony on the right hand and down on the right hand for the split, which is great fun. So you can interact the different harmonies, or have no harmony up there and a harmony down there. Great fun. So you've got two different harmony computers that can run simultaneously for you. You even have quite a lot of control actually of the way that the harmony sounds and the way that it uses the voices which are on the organ. So this bit we wouldn't normally show people, or we wouldn't normally get involved in, but because we're exploring all these organs a lot more, or in a lot more depth than we would normally do, because we have all this extra time in lockdown, the bit I'm about to show you is using the AOC screen. Now, you can find the AOC screen if you wish through on all of your features pages, but if you remember back to one of our earlier videos, if you hold down that feature button and hit a function on the organ, it will generally bring up a page that relates to it. So I'm going to hit the AOC one, and this is really interesting. It brings up a screen here where you can see what sections are affected by the AOC, and that's really interesting, because if we go right back to the very beginning, when we were talking about playing with my basic organ sound, and I was doing my merrily roll along, and we put the AOC on, we've always assumed and described the fact that the AOC is basically playing the keys on the organ as if I'm playing them, so it's using the same sound that I am. But that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. That's how it normally would be. So don't worry that if you don't understand this next bit or don't want to go into it, because the AOC will work normally for you anyway. But for anybody who wants to really experiment and come up with some interesting ideas and things, let's turn the organ sound off and come up here to our orchestral section. And we'll put something really simple on. Let's use our quick picks, and we'll put a piano in here, and we'll put strings in number 2. So we've got piano and strings. So as we said, normally AOC plays what's on here. So if I now play that piano sound with the strings, it's going to you can hear that. You can hear the strings are harmonizing and the piano. They're all playing the harmony notes exactly the same way as if I was playing them on the keyboard. But if we want to, we can go into the harmony screen and we can turn off what they call auto AOC, which is the feature that is making it automatically work as we want it to. And now you can actually choose via this screen what sections the harmony plays on. So for example, if I turn it off on the 2 orchestral voices, it actually doesn't work now. Which is kind of pointless really. Why would we turn it off completely? But what we can do is turn it back on for just one of those voices. so you can have the piano playing still one note, like it's the lead, and you can have the strings the piano is not doing the harmony, it's not doing the full block chord, but the strings are. And so you can get really nice effect. You can be playing your piano. So you've got the solo piano note, but then the strings behind it doing the chords. Of course, I could reverse it and have the piano playing the chords. And the strings now are just playing the one note. Interesting feature and something that you can experiment with to get all kinds of different effects on that same screen, and you can adjust for all the sections. See, this is the thing that my wife tells me off for doing, is trying to do two things at once, trying to talk and do this at the same time. Doesn't work. So you can experiment with different variations of that and have one voice doing the harmony, one voice not with the harmony. Or you can just leave it on automatic and it will just affect everything. But there's also another interesting thing you can do. And let's go back to just playing one voice at a time. Go back to the piano. You're really going to be sick of that song at the end, aren't you? So obviously you can hear there the harmonies playing. What I've done here is I've gone to the level screen, which we spoke about the other day when we were trying to change the volume of the virtuoso and the golden harp. On this level screen, on the upper page, there's actually a volume there for the harmony, which means you can actually change the volume of the harmony of the notes it's adding in. So if I turn that volume right down, okay, very subtle thing for you to hear, but my melody note is now more dominant over the other notes that are being added by the harmony. Playing is still at the same volume, but what I've done there is turn down the volume of the harmony that's coming up to go behind it. Amazing, really. I mean, so from what on the outside appears to be a very simple, well, we stick a button on there and it makes your chord sound better, there's a lot more to it and a lot more investigation you can do with trying the different harmonies and seeing what the effect is. And so if you want to be really smart with your own registration, you can then go in and choose what sections the harmony is actually playing on, and then you can even turn the volume of the harmony down so your melody notes are separate. So that feature has come such a long way since it was first introduced as a simple easy play feature, and it is cornerstone to the organ. So there's practically not a registration you'll put on, as I did at the very beginning with my big band, that doesn't use that harmony, because that's what music's all about, is having those big notes. And when you see me and Tom playing, and we're doing a bit of the showing off, we will always probably be playing right-handed chords to get that big sound. But with the harmony feature, we get that sound done for us anyway. And in fact, even from me and Tom, that can do things that we can't physically do on the keyboard. So brilliant feature. What we'll do tomorrow, we'll find an aria to sit down at, because somebody's asked us to do a little talk through of the aria pack. And so what we'll do tomorrow, we'll have a chat through with the aria pack and show the sounds and things that does. And we can have further this sort of discussion about harmony, because the great thing about an aria is that these harmony notes that we're talking about here will actually come up and illuminate, so you can actually see them, so we can talk a bit more about them. And also it gives us an opportunity to see how the harmony operates and functions on an E series organ as opposed to an A series. So I hope that's given you a bit of an insight behind the harmony. So if anybody's got more information about the history of it, then that'd be great. Because as I'm not a great historian, but I just love the fact that it's called the automatic organ computer, or I think now the musicians call it any old chord. So have fun with that, have an experiment. Sorry for going on again and going off on all these tangents. So let's play out again with our unknown song. Maybe we need to give it a title. Yeah, suggestions on a postcard. Think of a title for our playing out song. So I shall leave you with that one, and we'll see you again tomorrow. AOC Harmonies